This is the 16 element 6 bolt Ultimate Sprag for the 727 Chrysler TorqueFlite transmission made by A Transmission in Indiana. A was the first to manufacture and bring to market this style of sprag about 10 or 15 years ago. I'm going to show you and explain some of the differences between the Ultimate Sprag and the standard 12 element OEM style sprag, which is on the right, which is also a bolt-in sprag. It is my intention to make this a fairly short video for some of the folks who imply that the videos are too long. I'd highly recommend installing the Ultimate Sprag if you're building a racing 727. Every racing 727 that we build at Andrews Racing Transmissions gets an Ultimate Sprag. It's much more stable than the OEM style sprag. Let's first start with the OEM style sprag. Now this is a bolt-in sprag. I'm also going to show you how to install this Ultimate Sprag, and the installation will also apply to this OEM style sprag. This is your finger plate here. This is where your springs ride against, your springs and rollers. And then here's your outer sprag race. I'm not getting in the camera here. Both sprags have a receiver groove here, and that's going to collect any shavings that happen when you're drawing this into the case or pressing it into the case. So both of them have this receiver groove. That was from the factory, and if you press one of these out from the factory, you'll sometimes see some shavings in here. They do stay in there. So this finger plate, you just are gonna use your pliers to get it installed here on the OEM sprag, and then you're gonna go ahead and install that. Now when this OEM sprag fails, now here's your spring and rollers. These are just standard replacements here. When you have a sprag failure, the rollers will roll over these posts here, and the post will flatten, and this outer race will try and rip out of the transmission case. And that's the only reason you want to bolt a sprag in, is to keep the case from breaking if you have a sprag failure. So it's a little bit of a misconception that a bolt-in sprag will prevent an explosion. It will not prevent an explosion. With a factory drum, if you have a billet drum, you will not have an explosion. But if your sprag is bolted in, then you won't damage the case. We're going to focus solely on the 6 bolt 16 element Ultimate Sprag now from here on out. Now you could install this either with 6 bolts or you can install it with 4 bolts. It depends what style of case you have. The instructions that it comes with shows you the different cases, and if there's 2 lugs here, it requires special machining, and then you could install it. If you have this style of case, you could install it with the 4 bolts. If you have this style of case, it's a pretty simple process to be able to install all 6 bolts. Now my case has the lugs in it. I'm going to show you here. I'm going to pan over. Give me 1 second. My case has the lugs in it, and this customer is elected to only install the 4 bolts, and that's fine. So when you go to take this inner race out, your rollers are going to pop out, so make sure you don't lose them. This is what replaces the stock finger plate. This is a spring plate, and the overrunning clutch springs are attached to this plate, so they're much more stable. It's not necessarily a caged design like some of the other ones, but it is much more stable. So this is your outer race here, and like I said, there is a receiver groove, and this is your inner race here, and it is a special race. It is machined. You can't just use any race from a standard OEM style sprag. You have to get the special race from A if you need to replace it. There's a couple of different ways to install a bolt-in sprag. One way is you could use an arbor press, and you can press that in. You have to have a large press bed, and it requires some additional setup time. One way you don't want to install it is you do not want to install this with a hammer, because you can shatter the outer race, or you could crack the transmission case when you're installing it. The way I do it is I suck it in with the bolts. Now I use some different bolts. I have some installation bolts. I do not use the bolts that comes with the Sprag. I only use those one time to avoid stretching the bolts. So I have some installation bolts that I use, and that's what I do is I draw it into the case slowly, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do right now. Go ahead and lube up your outer race with blue assembly lube, and then you want to see the note here, up is at the 12 o'clock position. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to get these bolts started. You're going to put the Sprag race up against there, and you're going to start these bolts, your 4 bolts or 6 bolts. Start sucking it in evenly. And put your hand on the inside here so you could tell how well it's being drawn in, if it's being drawn in evenly. And you could also obviously look and see as well. And draw it in slowly. Got a different angle here, you guys. Now, you want to do this by hand. I've got a standard 3/8 ratchet. You don't want to use any cordless or impact tools when you're doing this. The main thing you want to avoid is you do not want to break one of these 1/4 by 28 bolts off in there. If you do that, you're going to have a real problem. This is a fairly expensive Sprag, and you don't want to break those off in there. If you keep an eye on how far your bolts have come through these holes, that will give you a good indication of your progress. And once they're about flush, you're about 3/4 of the way there, and you want to back them all out. What you're going to do is you're going to pull them out. You're going to notice there's some aluminum on here, some debris on there from it pulling in. You're also going to blow these holes out. Reason being is because you don't want to have anything in your threads to potentially gall this bolt up, and then you're going to have a problem. You're not going to be able to get it all the way in, or you're not going to get the bolt all the way out to install the new bolts with your stator support. Also, go ahead and clean these off. Now, what I do next is I use a spacer. The reason why I stop about 3/4 of the way in is you don't want this bolt to bottom out on this shoulder, because that could potentially break the bolt as well. So what I do then is I use just a spacer. You can use anything. There goes the blowgun. I don't have this shop completely set up yet, but I use this as a spacer to take up some of the play, so you will not bottom that bolt out on the shoulder, and then you could resume installing the Sprag. Now sometimes, because you're only drawing this in with if you're using the 4 bolts with 1 bolt up top, 3 bolts on the bottom, there sometimes can be a very slight gap. You won't be able to see it on this camera. Now this might seem a bit unusual or unorthodox, but go ahead, get you a 2x4 and lightly tap this Sprag race all the way in. Then go ahead, cinch your bolts up. This one was pretty tight. Now it's time to install the rear output shaft support. I might have said stator support before, you guys. I do apologize. Okay, you want to blow all this out with air and on the inside as well. Install your output shaft support into the case. These are your bolts, washers, and the brass locating ferrules. These ferrules keep everything in the center line. Go ahead and install them. Torque to 12 foot-pounds. So you remember when I was telling you about the receiver groove and the sprag to catch all the aluminum shavings from drawing this into the case? If you don't reinstall this set screw, those shavings could potentially fall out and they will stay in the pan, and on your next pan drop, your next service, you'll find those shavings and you might be alarmed. Go ahead and install this set screw and then also stake it into place. Alright, I'm trying to get the best possible angle here for you guys. Install your spring plate. Install all of the rollers. All the rollers are installed. Lube up your inner race and install it. You're going to do this by pressing down and turning in a clockwise motion. That inner race will go right in then. And then test fit your low reverse drone. Hopefully you've picked up some useful information on the A Ultimate Sprag. I got to get to building some transmissions. As always, thanks for watching.